Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us as we continue our celebration of LGBTQ plus Pride here at USDA. I'm Jeremy Wood, National LGBTQ plus Special Emphasis Program Manager for APHIS and Communications Director for Equality USDA. Before we begin the program, I'd be remiss if we didn't take a moment to recognize a few things. First, being that it's been difficult to feel very celebratory this Pride Month, with the social distancing requirements that come with COVID-19. For 50 years, we've come together as a community in June to refill our cups, so to speak, to celebrate our differences and the broad tapestry that is our community, how far we've come since Stonewall, and be visible in our communities as we continue to work towards full equality. At the same time, we must pause to acknowledge the racism that is pervasive in our community, as well as institutions worldwide that erase and devalue the lives and experiences of Black, Indigenous people of color, and the current civil unrest sparked as a result of centuries of oppression. It's past time for us to recognize that we as a movement and as a country owe to our Black and brown siblings and do the work to dismantle systems that keep the playing fields uneven. Finally, in what has been a rare cause for celebration this year, we must recognize this week's Supreme Court rulings that codify employment protections for LGBTQ plus individuals under Title VII of the Civil Rights Act, and protections for dreamers as they work to take part in the American dream. I found myself in tears as I read the words, "An employer who fires an individual merely for being gay or transgender violates Title VII." I can't think of a better way to recognize these events than with the words of our speaker today, Amber Hikes. Amber said, "This is a decades of activism, and it is the last 3 weeks. This is trans women of color throwing the first brick at Stonewall, and Black trans women leading our movements today. It's queer and trans people fighting in the streets and winning in the courts. This is our ancestors dancing and weeping in the heavens, and it is our fists raised up in the legacy on the ground. Our liberation contains multitudes and generations. It is ongoing, and we will not let our foot off the gas. The revolution is here." Again, thank you for joining us, and to present a formal welcome, I will turn over to Mishan Obishan. She is the Civil Rights Director for APHIS.
Good morning and happy Pride. I hope you and your family are safe and well. Thank you for taking the time to join us today. My name is Mishan Obishan, and I am the Civil Rights Director here at USDA APHIS. I was surprised and honored to be asked to speak with you today. This is really not my thing. But Jeremy is very persistent. Actually, it is the energy of the entire Equality USDA team that was the biggest influence on me today. They work really hard, and their commitment to civil rights, diversity, and inclusion makes me proud. 2020 vision, 2020 possibilities is the theme for this year's Pride celebration. I would like to start with 2020 hindsight. When Patrick Johnson and I hosted our first LGBTQ event in APHIS, I think 20 people showed up, and we were very discouraged, but determined to build a more inclusive environment here at APHIS. We soon discovered that we could not do it alone. We reached out to our network of LGBTQ SEPMs, and the very next year we had a very successful event with an increase of over 40% of participation and plenty of pride and energy. Every year we do better, and this year, even in our virtual world, we are able to achieve the vision of increasing awareness and creating an environment where LGBTQ plus can bring their entire selves to work. We're having multiple events, we have leadership support, proud employees and allies throughout USDA. And yes, it is as clear as 2020. Even today, I can say with complete confidence that the possibilities are limitless. The Equality USDA group is focused and resilient. Over the years, they have spent entire weekends at outreach events, sitting in recruitment booths, hosting educational sessions, sitting on panels, marching in parades, and even having enough energy at the end of the day to celebrate with one another. They are truly a fantastic team. All in the effort to improve representation of LGBTQ plus in the workplace. You can be who you are here at USDA. Did you notice something different this year? There was a plus sign added. So what does this plus sign mean? The term LGBTQ plus aims to be as inclusive of as many groups of people as possible. The plus is the least obvious part of the LGBTQ plus initialism and stands for those who aren't questioning their sexuality but identify as a part of a group that might not be so well known or understood. Our keynote speaker, Amber Hikes, has done extraordinary work in the area of inclusion and was instrumental in passing one of the nation's most trans-inclusive police policies. As a community organizer, she is truly a force. She added the black and brown stripes to the pride flag. The black and brown stripes represent the issues of people of color in the LGBT community. This symbolism is ringing loudly through the nation today as we acknowledge and fight for change and equality. I am very honored that she chose to join us today, and I look forward to her message. I would like to close by sharing that I am Black, lesbian, a woman, and so much more. I'm all of it, all the time. Thank you. Happy Pride.
Thank you, Mishan. I am persistent, but only in the pursuit of worthy endeavors. Your message is appreciated and right on time. As Mishan mentioned, our speaker today is Amber Hikes. Amber is the Chief Equity and Inclusion Officer for the American Civil Liberties Union, an impactful community organizer and activist. Her creation of the More Color, More Pride flag to center issues of racism in the Philadelphia LGBTQ community has taken hold as the new standard and flies over cities across the country, recently being raised over the Stonewall National Monument in New York City. The moral compass of Amber's work, intersectional inclusion, can be traced throughout her organizing and her work supporting and facilitating the pursuit of post-secondary education for youth of color experiencing poverty or homelessness. Amber has been recognized nationally by Out Magazine as the Community Organizer of the Year in the 2018 Out 100, and by Business Equality Pride as one of the 40 LGBTQ leaders under 40. Amber earned a master's degree in social work from the University of Pennsylvania and psychology and English degrees from the University of Delaware. She believes in employing an intersectional lens in all aspects of community work and leans daily on the words of Sister Audre Lorde. There is no such thing as a single-issue struggle because we do not live single-issue lives. We are excited and honored to have Amber join us today.
Thank you so much for inviting me here to be with you all. I am grateful that you are all watching, and I am eager for when we can gather again together in person. We knew a few months ago that Pride was going to look a little different this year, and boy were we right about that, in ways we could have never imagined. But I'll tell you, seeing agencies still carving out time for this kind of connection and learning is so important, and I'm thrilled that you all are here and doing that with me today. I want to specifically say thank you to all of you for the work that you're doing at the USDA. The work of the USDA keeps so many of us fed and healthy, but I know that your work can be invisibilized in so many different ways. So I want you to know that I see you, and I'm grateful for everything you do to protect and advance our food, agricultural, natural resources, rural development, and nutrition. Thank you so very much, especially during this time. Now, I am the Chief Equity and Inclusion Officer at the American Civil Liberties Union, and in my role, I provide the vision, the leadership, and the direction for the ACLU's nationwide strategy to support equity, diversity, and inclusion across all aspects of the organization's internal work and efforts. Whew. It's a big job. That said, I read once that if you can't explain what you do to a kindergartner, then you're probably doing it wrong. So sometimes I check myself and I say, could I talk about what I do, what my work is to a 6-year-old? And really over and over and over again, what it comes down to is that I work to make sure that people feel like they belong at work. Like we see them, like we value them, we care about them. And sure, there is a ton of policy and strategy and sophistication behind how I do that. But at the end of the day, that's what I do. And so that's what I do now. But I did spend the first decade of my career in education access work for underrepresented first generation low income students in West Philadelphia and in Compton and Long Beach in California. And just before I joined the ACLU, I was the executive director of the Office of LGBT Affairs for the city of Philadelphia. In that role, I got to create policy for Philly that was replicated in cities around the country. I got to work in partnership with my communities in every city office to build safer policing, more equitable housing and education, and create safe spaces where LGBTQ Philadelphians felt like and they knew they belonged in our city. So whether it's been fighting for education access, economic justice, the rights of LGBTQ people, people of color, people with disabilities, immigrants, women, people who are incarcerated, this has been my life's work. And above all that, I am a Black queer woman. And for this time that we are in, this is not just the fight of my life, it is the fight for my life. I come to this work from activism and organizing and always in service to my people. So that's a bit about me. We have a whole lot to cover in our little bit of time together. So I want to take a bit of time to set us in the context of the moment we're in. So we all, with almost no notice, had our lives turned upside down 3 months ago. In addition to our very, very full-time jobs, we were now homeschool teachers and children's counselors and caretakers for the elders in our families. We were faced with the chaos of nap times and meds and drive-by celebrations. Then at the same time, we had the devastation of saying a last goodbye to a loved one over FaceTime. The grief of canceled weddings, the ache of loneliness. And we struggled with uncertainty. So many of us are worried, will my partner be able to keep their job? Will my kids fall behind in school? Will I be okay if I get sick? All of this and building a whole new reality of remote work. When we measure our productivity, we must remember, and I say this all the time to my team at the ACLU, and I impart it upon you now. We are not working from home. We are at home almost entirely not by choice, during a crisis, trying to work. That is a difference and a distinction that must be noted. This is a lot, and frankly, it's too much. And I say that all to you now, because it is okay to not be okay. And that's because just as quickly, our whole world turned upside down all over again. The police murder of Black people is not new in this country. I want to be very clear about that. And heck, it's not even new that it was caught on film. But the tipping point of police anti-Black violence that happened just 2 weeks ago, and how it has brought our fight for racial justice to the center of our country, now that feels new. Slide, please. To my Black community that is on this call, I see you. I am you. I love you. Like so many of you, I've spent the last 2 weeks protesting in the streets, donating bail support to grassroots organizations, and vacillating wildly from pride to horror as the events played out on the world stage. And like so many of you, the return to work has felt profoundly important, but also hugely overwhelming. I get it. It's okay to not be okay. Many of us are filled with rage, fighting back tears between Zoom calls, trying desperately to be productive in a society that reminds us every single day that we are disposable and expendable. It's okay to be enraged. It's okay to be in tears. It's okay to be exhausted. It's okay if you're somehow energized. It's okay if you ache for community, and it's okay if you want to be left alone. This is trauma. For my Black folks, it's generational, historic, vicarious, and chronic trauma. And it's real. And to my LGBTQ community that intersects with Black communities and immigrant communities and feminist and disabled and Muslim communities, I know Pride is going to be hard this year. It'll be lonely, it'll be different, and it may not much feel like a celebration. But I also know that we are a part of a legacy of Pride as something much, much, much bigger than a parade. And so let's actually talk about that. I'm not going to spend our few minutes here doing a one-on-one lesson on Pride and how it came to be, but I will say this. The first Pride, it wasn't a parade. Heck, it wasn't even a protest. The first Pride was a riot. In 1969, it was a riot that was in defiance of, well, many of you know the story, police brutality. Police had been harassing, harming, abusing, discriminating against LGBTQ people with impunity, and they had had enough. They stood up and fought back for days. But here's the thing. Our folks didn't just riot at Stonewall. They also rioted at Dewey's and Compton Cafeteria. Slide, please. And the riots that were started by trans women of color in New York and California and Philadelphia are the foundation of every hard-earned victory, every pride parade covered in glitter, every moment of radical visibility that queer people have had ever since. And so I center us in that reality, the truth of pride, so that we can collectively understand the moment we are in. This call, this context, this movement, so that we can understand it more comprehensively. And I'm going to demonstrate that to you with a quick story. So a few years ago, in 2017, I was the executive director of the Office of LGBT Affairs for the city of Philadelphia. When the mayor recruited me into the role, he told me that my job was to work within the LGBTQ community and, wait for it, solve racism. That's right. Okay, so I know that you all are on mute, and there's a lot of us right now, but please tell me that you're laughing or crying. You could be crying for me as well. I'll take both of those reactions. They're perfectly legitimate. But he was serious. It was an incredibly challenging time. Our communities were in crisis. For years, there were conversations about discrimination within our LGBTQ community in bars, in places of public accommodation, a lack of representation in leadership, and so much more. And there was even a 1986 report delivered to the mayor documenting these issues, but nothing was done for decades. And now in 2016, the smoking gun was that a video was released of an owner of a prominent gay bar in Philly. And he was caught on tape speaking disparagingly about Black people and saying the N-word over and over and over again. Now, I want to be clear. This was a man who had made his living off of the LGBT community, and specifically Black and brown folks. He was not a random troll on Facebook. He had a bar. He was a leader. And this was the last in a slew of race-based incidences in our community, and enough was enough. There were boycotts, there were protests, there were calls for resignations, there were town halls and hearings. And now my charge, when I was brought in, was to guide the city through this impossible time and do so thoughtfully, intentionally, and strategically. Now, since we know that oppression doesn't exist in a vacuum, we need to tackle some difficult conversations, not just about race, but about gender and class and disability and xenophobia. We would need to blaze the trail forward, not just for Philadelphia, but for the whole world. It was a heavy task. And there were hosts of initiatives that we used to tackle this. But in June of 2017, I introduced the More Color, More Pride flag to the city of Philadelphia and unwittingly to the world. Now, we picked a flag. Why a flag? Well, I don't know what to tell y'all, but LGBTQ folks love flags. Click through this slide. We have flags for lesbians, bisexual folks, trans folks, pansexual folks, asexual folks, the leather community, bears. Flags are really important to us. It's very important to us. And so we created a flag. It was a simple symbol, a rainbow flag with 2 new stripes, one black, one brown. A simple symbol to stand in solidarity and center the people whose experiences and narratives have been so often ignored and whitewashed and erased. Now, I say it was simple, but history tells us the flag was anything but simple. We raised it at City Hall on a Thursday, and by Friday, it had gone viral. And the feedback was overwhelmingly positive. We had calls, emails, texts, tweets. Y'all, I had to learn how to tweet. I'm grabbing Gen Zers on the street, asking them what this means. How do you create a hashtag? It was a mess. But what we heard over and over and over again was thank you, thank you, thank you. We needed this. It was long overdue. We stand with you and with our LGBTQ siblings of color. It was beautiful, but it wasn't all positive. And so when I think back to that time, I think about how we raised the flag on Thursday with glitter and drag queens. And by Friday, I had death threats and hate mail from people supposedly within my own community. And how do I know that? Well, because they started their emails and their phone calls. As a gay white man, I am outraged. He said, "How dare you talk about race? This isn't the time." They called me a Black Lives Matter N-word and said that I had hijacked their community. They said over and over again, "I'm not racist, but..." Now, you all, the following months, they were not easy, but my God, were they transformative. They were revolutionary. The flag had, just like that, started an international conversation from South Africa to New Zealand to the Netherlands to Australia. People were talking about the reality of oppression within marginalized communities. Next slide, please. The conversation had changed seemingly overnight, and now we see our flag everywhere. From Piccadilly Square in London to the red carpet at the Met Gala to an entire line of Converse uplifting the voices of LGBTQ young people of color and putting their money where their product is. Now, I have been telling that story this month more than I have in the last 3 years combined, because we are at a moment right now where the intersection of our identities and our oppressions are front and center. Our country is finally waking up to the realities of violence, injustice, and inequities that Black people have experienced and died from for the last 400 years in this country. So we are at a moment where so many people can understand the need for an LGBTQ flag that centers Black lives, voices, and leadership. Earlier, I mentioned that a few months ago, we knew Pride was going to be different this year. One by one, our marches and parades were canceled. Little by little, it sunk in that this year was going to be more different than any other before it. But there are some bright spots in the difference. We don't need to remind people that Pride is protest. Pride is only protest. And we don't have to remind people that Pride is intersectional. It is only intersectional. Pride is connected into the movement for racial justice like its life depends on it, because let me tell you, it does. It always has. Pride is connected into the movement for racial justice, and it is our resistance, it is our resilience, it is our power, and it is our joy. Pride is ours, collectively and entirely ours. And I say ours because now I'm going to ask you to do some reflection, because we're going to engage around finding our place in the moment of the movement. I just mentioned that Pride was converging into this racial justice moment and movement for our country. This movement is forcing us to reimagine business as usual and our participation in oppressive systems. We are protesting a global pandemic, systemic racism, in the midst of a global pandemic, COVID. Now, these conditions are not only not ideal, they're very literally life-threatening. Very literally. But I think there's opportunity in crisis. Let me tell you what I mean by that. I'm going to take it out of the macro and bring it down to the individual level. What is required of us now is a collective interrogation. One about where we are situated in this moment. Within that collective acknowledgement, I want us to be aware of our individual responsibility and accountability. There's a lot of talk right now about systems and institutions, but they don't change on their own. Individuals prompt, shape, and execute those changes. I mean that in a macro sense, but I want us to turn inward, focus micro, on our own work, on our own homes, on our own selves. So here's what I want you to be thinking about. How are you going to use this moment to re-engage with the world, with your family, with your friends, even strangers? How will we use our privilege, our power, our space for change? The activity I'm going to lead us in is a self-reflection on what we keep, what we increase, what we start, and what we stop during this time. Let me explain. Next slide, please. Let's just talk about the last few months. Now, I want you all to open up a new document on your computer and do this internal activity for yourself. I want you to consider at home, at work, in the world, You're going to think about how you are moving through the world right now. What can you keep? What can you increase? What can you start? What can you stop? And I'm going to walk us through each of these right now and give some prompts and examples to help you get started. But please write while I'm talking. Take notes, start jotting down what these ideas spark for you and how you'll be creating your own commitments. Let's start with keep. Put the next slide, please. I often frame crisis as opportunity. In these moments, we have opportunity to create and change business as usual. Now let's look at this moment of COVID. There have been learnings, benefits, and strengths that have come out of this incredibly difficult time for our country. So whether it's recognizing the importance of togetherness, maybe it's grappling with how we care and support for caregivers, how we check in on one another, how we're mindful of creating community and connection and being creative about that and innovative of ways we stay together. Maybe we found practices in this remote work environment that were more equitable for people with disabilities. There are things we want to keep. Even from a social justice context, you can think about it. What do I want to keep from this moment? For Black folks, think about how are you taking care of yourself right now and how can you keep doing that? How are you in connection with community that you can continue to hold and share space with? And for non-Black folks, maybe you want to keep talking about racial justice, learning about the history of anti-Black oppression in our country, thinking critically about how our institutions and our systems are set up to harm Black folks. These kinds of things can be the keep. Increase. Increase is thinking about, is there something that we are doing in this moment where we want to turn up the volume? Maybe we started reading something new on racial justice. Maybe we checked in with people outside of our department. Maybe we're noticing who's missing from our social circles. Maybe we started donating some social justice causes and we want to increase that kind of engagement. Think about what you want to increase that you started in the last few months. Those are just some prompts. Only you know what's true for you, but hopefully that's starting to get the gears turning. Now let's move on to start. There are some things that we have been considering, but we haven't yet acted on them. When I think about start, the first thing that comes to mind is privilege. As I'm talking about privilege, I want to adapt something my friend Marquita Thomas used to say. She said, allyship is necessary to reach full equality. If you think that you've reached equality, and if you think that we've reached equality, and you look behind you, and there are people who are still fighting to keep a roof over their heads, people whose children are being held in cages, people who are still being murdered by the police because of their race, then we have not reached equality. You have reached privilege. Now, I love that quote because it reminds me of the importance to interrogate our surroundings and to be thinking about who's at the table and who's not at the table. Barney Frank in Massachusetts reminds us that if we don't have a seat at the table, we're probably on the menu. And that is exactly right. But I come from an activism and an organizing background, and I say there should be no decision about us without us. No decision about us without us. Both of these ideas are about connecting folks into spaces where they should be in and people they should know. So I want us to be thinking about what can we start? And where does our privilege come into this? Maybe you've donated or gone to a protest or posted a Black Lives Matter meme on social media, but you're still not going the extra step of checking the people on your timeline who are saying racist things. Or maybe they're downplaying serious injustices. Or maybe you haven't called in All Lives Matter folks. Maybe you still have a racist family member and you just haven't gotten around to telling them, I don't agree with what you're saying, and I think you need to check yourself. I know this is scary, but when we are thinking about real allyship, we should be thinking about that maybe this is the time where when you see an injustice, you're going to jump into the fray so that someone else from a marginalized community doesn't have to do it. Maybe that's what we're going to start. Now, the start is difficult, but the stop is the most challenging aspect. The stop forces us to do deep internal work. The stop is the real call-in. It's a call-in of yourself. So many people are waking up not just to these oppressions, but they're waking up to how they have and may even continue to perpetuate them. People are starting to interrogate that for themselves. And it's difficult work, because as you can interrogate, you can start to admit to yourself that maybe you're new to anti-racist work. And what do I mean by anti-racist work? Well, Angela Davis obviously reminds us that it's not enough to be non-racist. You have to be actively anti-racist. Being anti-racist requires you to move forward as an ally and as an accomplice. Now, some of you may have heard ally is a verb, right? Allyship, that is a verb. It's about doing. So similarly, allyship, it's not a destination. It's a journey. You don't get to allyship and say, okay, I am now an ally. My work is done here. It is a constant journey. When we're talking about racial justice work, it's a constant journey because so many have benefited from white supremacy for so long that you have to actively unlearn what you've been taught. It's a constant exercise. And in this journey of allyship, you will be called in, because sometimes when you're doing the work, when you're taking risks, when you're really leaning into it, you're going to make mistakes. And sometimes you're going to get it wrong. That's the work. Maybe when we're thinking about what we're going to stop, we say, I'm going to stop being personally defensive when someone tells me that something I did hurt them or harmed them. I'm going to stop silencing people who speak up about inequitable situations. I'm going to stop ignoring or explaining away injustice. I'm going to stop being silent. This is so important on our journey of allyship. This is so important. I said before that there are going to come times where you may say something, you may be well-intentioned, but you're going to say something that may have landed the wrong way, was harmful, outdated, maybe alienated a person from an impacted community. And someone may bring that to your attention. Someone who brings that to your attention is not calling you out. They are calling you forward. Your job as an ally is that if someone gives you the gift of the labor of calling you in and calling you forward, you thank them for it. And you commit to doing your research, and then you commit to doing better. There are more resources out here than ever before. And so you can do that work. Allyship is about listening. It's about taking corrections. It's about being grateful for the opportunity to do better. That's what I see when I look at the protesters. I see people who are calling America forward. And if we are going to take on the task of overhauling our political systems and our legal systems and our housing systems and education, then the least we can do is overhaul our individual ethos and our individual thinking. It will be a much easier overhaul in this work if we can all do our own work. Now I'm going to stop talking and give you about 3 minutes to jot down some bullet points for yourself. What are you going to keep? What can you increase? What are you going to start? And what will you commit to stopping? As you're writing these down, if you're comfortable and able, please throw them into the chat. This is an excellent opportunity for individual accountability, and you frankly will probably inspire others with what you've come up with for yourself. You can drop into the chat anything that you've come up with from the 4 categories: keep, increase, start, stop. Go ahead, throw them in the chat just as they come up, but certainly take the next few minutes to put them together for yourself. You all can stop the video here or pause it, whatever works. I'm just gonna finish on out. This next portion will be just a response after people have populated the chat, and then I'll do a closing. All right. Thank you all so much. Now I know that we're not together live. I know you all are watching remotely, so I can't really respond to your notes, but this is what I will challenge you to do. Take the commitments that you just wrote and send them to a colleague. Send them to a family member. Ask them to hold you accountable. Ask them to remind you of the commitments that you made during this time, and make this a process that you're committed to, that lasts beyond the moment we're in right now. This is a time in our country and in our world's history where we are being called to do more for each other, to see, to understand, to really show up for one another. And I think about the fact that as children, so many of us thought about what we would do in times of great injustice. If you ever wondered to yourself, what would I have done during early American slavery or during 1960 civil rights? There is no need to wonder any longer. You are doing it right now. And so I need all of us to keep doing better. Show up as the ally and accomplice you always thought you would be. This is the moment. We need everyone in this fight. There are no more bystanders. There are no more sidelines. We are all in the game. And I am personally honored to be in the game with you all. Thank you so much. Happy Pride. And thank you for everything you all are doing for each other and for our country.
Wow. Many thanks to Amber for the inspiring call to action. I know every time that I have the pleasure of hearing her speak, I come away wanting to do better and learn more. To many of you, this was a great guide on how to step up from just being an ally into being an advocate and learning to leverage your privilege to the benefit of marginalized communities. To others, it may seem like something you want to aspire to, but you're not sure you're equipped for that role just yet, and that's okay. No one should expect of themselves to be a model ally right out of the gate. It's actually pretty important to listen and learn so that when you begin to employ some of the ideas Amber shared, you're clear on what message you want to send and what message is the one the community needs shared. It's constantly learning and evolving, willingness to listen and accept direction and sometimes correction, and the passion to be ever moving forward that make great allies. I've been lucky in my life and my career to have allies that I've seen develop this way and have enabled me to bring my authentic self to work at USDA for almost 20 years now. As a college student in the South, I never imagined that I could have a career in which I could be out, especially not so early, and in turn be here working as an advocate for all minority communities every day. If you'll indulge me a moment, I'd like to say a few things about one of the most impactful of those allies in my life, and for so many others. She has been a model advocate for equal employment and civil rights for her entire federal career, not to mention passion for animal welfare. She is the first person to let me know that not only was it okay for me to bring my entire self to work, it was expected and valued. We've laughed and cried together. She has opened her family to me and held my hand as we both walked in our first Pride Parade. She's been my boss, a constant mentor, and most importantly, my friend. Here to share a few words about her ally journey is Dr. Elizabeth Goldentire, Deputy Administrator of APHIS Animal Care.
Hi, my name's Betty Goldentire. I'm the APHIS Animal Care Deputy Administrator, and I'm here to talk about being a good ally to the LGBTQ community. I'm a straight, cisgendered woman with a mailbox full of flyers from the AARP. And believe me, I had a lot to learn about being an ally. But I've been fortunate in my personal life and in my career to have so many people who helped me along the way. I don't claim to be any kind of expert on being an ally, but I do have two things to share with you this morning that have been helpful to me. The first thing is to think about your assumptions. And when I started to realize how many of those assumptions I made, I really realized that was getting in the way of seeing people for who they are. If I don't assume that this person's straight or that person's gay, if I just let that all go, everyone can be who they are. And it makes it so much easier to really relate to people and be there for them. You're not kind of trying to fight against those assumptions. And the second thing I like to mention is that we should all be kind to ourselves. This is not easy. We're gonna make mistakes. Things change, and there's a lot to it. And if you're there for your LGBTQ colleagues and friends and family, you're there for them and you care for them. That's what really matters. That's what everybody wants. And people are super forgiving on the little slip ups because the important thing is that you're there and you care. So be kind to yourself. Have a wonderful Pride Month. Thank you so much.
Hello again. This is Charmin Rickers. So I was asked to share with you what this year's Pride means to me. 2020 vision, 2020 possibilities. Well, it reminds me of a quote that I read some time ago from Les Brown, and it states, "It takes someone with a vision of possibilities to obtain new levels of experience, someone with the courage to live their dreams." So it also reminds me of not needing these glasses, right? Because when people say that they have 2020 vision, that means that they have perfect eyesight, and so as that relates to me is that when you have perfect eyesight, you don't need anything to make corrections to your eyes. It means that you don't need to be looking through diversity lenses at the LGBT community or anyone for that matter. You should just be able to see people for who they are, and which is their heart, right? Their heart. And so this year's vision, 2020 vision and 2020 possibilities, also means everyone should be able to live their dreams, loving whomever they need to love, whomever they want to love, be whoever they want to be, however they want to be called what they want to be called, whatever they want to be called, whatever it is that they want to be called. So most people who know me know that I am very transparent and I'm very sharing. And so with that being said, it was in 2012 that I identified as a lesbian while still serving on active duty in the United States Navy. During this time, President Obama publicly supported same-sex marriages, the first sitting U.S. president to do so. And 2 years prior to that, in 2010, he signed the Don't Ask, Don't Tell, Repel Act. So, when I think about the Don't Ask, Don't Tell, before it was repelled, that meant that people, service members had to show up not being their authentic self. And so for me, I could show up just being Charmin, and there's no different. But those that wanted to identify themselves, and their true selves had to not be their true self. Me, I didn't know any other way. So when people would ask me, when I was on active duty, and it was kind of ironic as well, I was the deputy diversity officer. So it was a great time for me to be out because guess what? I was looking before through a pair of lenses, right? At the LGBT community before I fell in love with a woman. And then once I fell in love, I was able to have a different vision where I didn't need these glasses because love was love. And that's all I needed. That's all we need is love, right? That's all we need is love. And so it is very important for me to be able to show up at work, being my authentic self, not hiding who I love, not being able to share in my my life outside of work with others at work for fear of anything. So, my fellow LGBT community, those that have had a challenge and still are having challenges, because not everyone is supportive of people being authentic. So they don't have 2020 vision and 2020 possibility mindset. And so I'd like to add, it is in these possibilities that in our most amazing lives can be found. That it is in the dreaming that we can create bold and beautiful visions of ourselves. And it is in the entertaining of the thought of something unachievable that we start to actually make our way towards achieving it. And that shows up on a daily basis in different forms. We just had the Supreme Court ruling in sex orientation discrimination. And so that is what 2020 vision, 2020 possibilities mean to me. And so if I was to ask you to reflect back in history of mankind, in which someone had a vision of possibilities of numerous things, like the light bulb, right? The electricity, for instance, or like electric car, for instance, like man walking on the moon, or just about the first African-American president, or the first female astronaut, or the first anything, right? Inventors, creators, visionaries, then people would think that it was the unthinkable back then, because they didn't have a mindset of possibilities. They didn't have a vision of seeing what was possible for the future. But just think, we have the opportunity to move forward in the future with 2020 vision and 2020 possibilities. I'd like to thank you for allowing me to share just a little piece of me with you. And happy Pride to everyone. Be safe and out there. And I'll see you next time.
Hey everyone, my name's Adriana Campagna, and I am a field office engineer with NRCS out of Salem, Oregon. I'm also the treasurer for Equality USDA. I identify as queer, and I use she, her, hers, and they, them, their pronouns. I'm sure you all know that this year's theme is 2020 Vision, 2020 Possibilities. I think the fact that I feel safe enough to be true to myself and identify as queer, and not only do I identify as queer, but I present myself in a way that I'm automatically read as queer. And I think the fact that I do this and I feel comfortable enough to do this is kind of like the embodiment of this year's theme. So looking back, anyone who is in the queer community, we owe the rights that we hold today to queer people of color who fought the fight. And now, in the same month that we're celebrating Pride and the sacrifices that the folks before us made, we also have to work to stand up with our Black brothers and sisters who are currently fighting for their right to live their life without the fear of being murdered unjustly. So I look back and I see how the queer community has progressed over time, largely due to Black, Indigenous people of color. And I see the possibility that we have as a country and as a world for a brighter future if we stand with them as they did with us. To me, this year's theme is about honoring the folks that came before us and uniting together for a better future. And so I hope that this theme resonates with all of you, and I hope that you enjoy the Pride observance this year.
Hi, my name's Gabriella Coughlin. My pronouns are she, hers. I am a soil conservationist for USDA's Natural Resources Conservation Service. I'm also the Outreach and Engagement Coordinator for Equality USDA, and I'm located in Albuquerque, New Mexico. And today I wanted to talk a little bit about my journey as an intersectional ally, accomplice, and queer member of the LGBTQ+ community here at USDA. And like many of you, celebrating Pride this year has been a bit of a struggle. For me, having lost not one but two aunts to COVID and then becoming an aunt for the second time all in the span of a couple of weeks has been exhausting, to say the least, on top of juggling the new challenges we have in the workplace and trying to put conservation on the ground. So for me, in today's video, I wanted to kind of get out of the house and come to my happy place, which for me is this hole in the ground. As a soil scientist, anytime I can get in the dirt and describe what's going on is a good day, and that's what I've been doing today. And so I am located about 45 miles north of Albuquerque on the unceded lands of the Cochiti Pueblo along the Middle Rio Grande. And, today my journey in LGBTQ+ advocacy at USDA started about 4 years ago when I volunteered for my first Pride event. And at the time, I was an ally to the community, and having lost a parent to HIV/AIDS, I always felt connected to the community in that shared experience of loss, trauma, and hopelessness. And also growing up in Las Vegas, I was no stranger to seeing a lot of drag queens and a lot of members of the community hanging out. And so for me, having spent the first 9 years of my career with USDA as a soil scientist, I was often in very white, male-dominated spaces, and so for those first couple of years I did my best to assimilate into the good old boys club. And for me, growing up rodeoing, I learned at a young age how to downplay my ethnicity to ward off any disparaging remarks. So I did my best to kind of compartmentalize who I was at the workplace, and after a few years just realized that wasn't me. Why was I trying to pretend to be a middle-aged white man when I'm clearly a Spanish Mexican woman of mixed indigenous descent, something that I should be incredibly proud of. But there's something about shame and stigma that really makes you feel like you can't be proud of who you are. And so it took that first Pride event for me to really be able to tap into the courage of the LGBTQ+ community and use it as my own as I started to take up more space in these often male-dominated fields of study. And so after that first Pride event, I applied to become the LGBTQ+ SEPM, and the rest has been kind of history. For the last 4 years, I have gained a new sense of interest and engagement with my day job. I have learned how to check my privilege, identify my blind spots, and be okay and open to be wrong and change, which has been uncomfortable at times, but I've welcomed it. It's made me a better employee, and it's also allowed me to gain a lavender family here at USDA. And during these years, I have learned again so much, and I learned that in the work that we do as SEPMs, it's our role and responsibility to be able to educate our employees on how our work in agriculture, natural resources, and land management is directly tied to these histories and systems of oppression and enslavement. So for me, I look at the world through the lens of soils, and I found an example of how soils and civil rights have intersected. And a couple of years ago, the Equal Justice Initiative had started the Community Remembrance Project, which collected soil samples from lynching sites across the Jim Crow South. And so if you look that up, the photos are incredibly devastating, sobering, and they are relevant reminders that those acts of violence didn't die then, and they are still unfolding right now. And so for when I have to have some tough conversations in very small towns with people on why, why should we be funding LGBTQ plus issues, or, why should we care about issues in the South. Here in New Mexico, I let them know that this is all tied to the same oppression that has been the lived experience of indigenous communities across the state. And for me, I really try to tie my advocacy to make it local and make it relevant so that people feel like they have a skin in this game. They have a dog in this fight, because their oppression is my oppression, is your oppression. And we aren't free until we overcome those systems of oppression. And so, before getting too long into this, I guess for me, I would like to encourage you all, wherever your happy spot is, figure out a way to dig deep into that history to find where those systems of oppression overlap with your lived experiences, so that you can know that history, you can understand it, and you can share it. And it's that much more meaningful and powerful for somebody else to hear that, because they know you and you're a good person. So, maybe what you're saying is something they should listen to as well. So, all that to say, I'm wishing you all a happy Pride, and I look forward to seeing you all on the other side of this. And stay strong, stay healthy, and we'll see you soon. Bye.
On behalf of all the agencies who participated in the planning and presentation of this year's Pride events, and of course my Equality USDA family, I'd like to thank everyone for taking the time to join us. If you know folks that didn't get a chance to view this program as it's launched, please share the link, as this will remain up right here on the USDA YouTube page. If you missed our program from June 11th and would like to view it, please let your agency SEPM know, and we'll be sure to get you the link. It's been a pleasure to present this year's events, and we hope everyone learned and enjoyed. Happy Pride, y'all!